All systems go. Cleared for takeoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo. We're back. The first look here this week on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube station. Got the collaboration. My guy, DGen75. Bring him in here in a second. But before we do, I want to remind you guys, this show is brought to you and sponsored by DGen75.com. You can head on over to DGen75.com. Use promo code SHIPIT. Get yourself 10% off any package. I'll let James talk more about that here in a second. But James, got to bring you in, man. Week 3 behind us. Crazy week. Week 4 in front of us. Looks like a fun one. We'll talk about that. How you doing this week, my friend?
I mean, pretty good. It was a really fun weekend. A lot of things played out how I want, except how I wanted, except for a couple of the big expensive running backs that I had way too much exposure to. So just another week of being close, feeling good about the process, ready to get back after it again this week. Yeah,
they're already asking us on Twitter. They said, hopefully this show is going to bring us the double running back combo that you need that's going to drop almost 100 DK points. So you got that ready for the people?
Well, I mean, now that we know that we can count on Devin Achane to reliably get us 4 touchdowns every week, I feel like DFS just got a lot easier. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Devin moving the chains was kind of like a good nickname, but then Adam Schefter went and clarified and said it's actually a Chan, a much worse pronunciation than what you would expect and what you were hoping for, I think.
Right. Now that it's a Chan, now somebody with the 4 touchdowns, people are going to start calling him 4Chan. You know that's coming.
That's coming. That's a good call, actually. Quick, witty. I like it. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us. As always, do us a favor on the way in. Hammer that like button. Helps us out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Speaking of 4, we're looking for 4. We're going for 4,000. The tour for 4, we're calling it, before the drive for 5. When we get to 4,000 subscribers, we're going to be giving away a 6-month bundle to ShipItNation.com. If you guys want to go over to ShipItNation.com and try it out, you can use promo code DGen75. Get 10% off that. You can even do the trial for $19. Just give it a shot. Use the code. It helps James out. And then when you convert over, there's an extra deal there for you as well. So let's dive in. What do you want to talk about first? You want to go through any week 3 takeaways you have? We did the review show this week. I'm sure you saw the guy that won the first, second, same lineup, just flipped the flex. Then he was in 3rd, 7th, 9th. I saw his interview over on Roto Grinders. So congrats to him. Huge week. But any thoughts on that lineup? Any other thoughts on week 3 that you want to talk about first?
I mean, it was a pretty good build. It made a lot of sense. You know, I made a comment where I said there's 3 ways to play a super chalky game, referencing the Chargers and the Vikings, right? And I said the only bad way to play it is to completely fade it on a slate like this. And I got a lot of people being like, "Oh no, you can always fade a game." But look at the game that ended up happening, right? There was just too many guys going off in that game to not at least have some pieces of it, right? And so I felt pretty vindicated when there's a game like that that just has a perfect shootout environment that to completely fade it is typically, especially in big field stuff, I just don't think it's really ever the play. I think you either get overweight on it or you try to select some contrarian pieces. So that was my big takeaway.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing because we are going to segue into this week here shortly, and we've got it again. We got a reset of last week almost, in the sense we have one total far and away above all the rest. We saw how that played out last week. I'm sure it'll get a little bit overweight and carried away this week, so maybe there's some reason to look against it in certain spots. But the key takeaway for me was kind of what you just said at the end, is even if you're not going to go in that direction, there's ways you can go and get different. But then it was also if you didn't have pieces from these other spots. So if you were in on that game, great, but you still should have had some Miami. If you were in on the Tua Tyreek stacks, and even though River Craycraft and Smythe and those guys didn't come through, you should have had some of the Minnesota LAC game where you could have got a piece of that. So definitely think that's a key to take away for this week. We'll try and pinpoint some of those games for you. But one thing to note too, by the way, London schedule starts up this week, I believe. So you got Atlanta, Jacksonville, early morning game. Then you've got Jacksonville staying over to play Buffalo on the 8th. And then you've got Baltimore, Tennessee. So there's a 3-week stretch. Shout out to my guy, Jack. He loves a good London stretch. He said he's going to be at least a couple of these games, like he said, to check it all out. But that's one thing to note. So it's with the 2 Monday night games are over with. The London game this week still leaves us with a 12-game slate for the main slate for week 4. Let's talk about this. We'll start with Cincinnati, Tennessee. And we just saw what happened last night with Cincinnati. They get the job done, but Burrow, it's not looking good, man. So what's your thoughts on that one? Take away from last night and then apply it to this week coming up.
at least last night he had a bit of a pulse, right? At least he started getting the ball to Jamar Chase a little bit, which that's an encouraging sign. But overall, man, I think this injury is affecting him more than people realize. I strained my calf last November. That shit's real. I'm just going to tell you, that's like a real injury, and you don't just bounce back from it quickly, even a young, spry buck like Joe Burrow. So I think in the long term, I'm still buying on Joe Burrow, but in the short term, in a matchup like this, man, there's just no way I'm interested in playing Joe Burrow in this environment whenever he still hasn't shown that I think he's 100% healthy yet.
Yeah, and he also said, like, I thought the comments were interesting. He's like, yeah, well, you could re-injure it, but you could also go 0-3. It's like, who gives a shit? Like, even Jamar Chase has been in interviews saying, like, just take it down a notch and just wait it out. But he wants to play. I'm sure, he's got that little rivalry with Patrick Mahomes. He sees Mahomes gutting it out with his injuries and playing through them, that Joe Burrow's not going to go down and do it like that. So we'll see how it goes. But I think, again, like you said, so this game's a 42.5-point total. It's in Tennessee. What are some other options here? The one thing that you said that I thought was key, I liked him up top last night, and my captain didn't quite get there. But with Jamar Chase, it shows, man. Just throw that guy the ball. Good things will happen. They just got to continue with that. It just felt really hard within the first half, and then finally got it really rolling there in the second half and carried on throughout the game. But what are your thoughts at running back, wide receiver, anybody here that you would have interest in at all in this game?
So, like, the most encouraging thing I can say about Jamar Chase is they were putting him in the slot and just getting him easy targets, right? Just get him flowing. Just let him have the ball. He's so electric with the ball in his hand. And to get him those easy points opens up the bigger games for him. So that was a really encouraging sign, just that they used him different instead of just throwing him freaking 20-yard out routes all the time, which are much lower conversion rate. As far as the running backs go, Joe Mixon was surprisingly efficient. I want to be a believer in him, but my rule is this. When Derrick Henry's at home and nobody wants to play him, I'm always warm to playing Derrick Henry. So this is one of those weeks. Now that he's down to 7,000, once again, people are seeing his usage not be as high as it's been in the past, but all it takes is one big run from Derrick Henry or for them to get in a good game script. You get those 20, 22 carries, maybe a couple catches. He falls in the box twice. He breaks the slate. So I think Derrick Henry, because in a sloggy type game, which looking at this total looks like it might be sloggy, I like going running backs in games like that.
Yeah, and I was trying to see too if there's like you can go back to like Sample or Wilcox. They're both 2,500. I know they were more showdown plays last night at $200 and whatnot, but just in general, they're there 2,500. Chig is there still too if you want to use someone from the Tennessee side. Jamar Chase only 78. I like our guy Nick Higgins forgot how to receiver. The best was I saw the comment, like Underdog throws it out there, said Higgins is going to the locker room and said, yeah, someone said to get the butter off his fingers. I don't know if you saw the one directly at his chest that just completely dropped it. So I don't know. I'm not super high on this game either. I think it's all going to come down to when we get to Miami Buffalo and going through it, but there's going to be other places on this slate that you have to go to get different. We saw last week secondary stacks with Kenneth Walker and Adam Thielen be some of the game changer difference in these big winning lineups. So going to be looking for that in certain spots. I wouldn't hate it if it ended up being a Derrick Henry and something from Cincinnati or vice versa, or, Mixon and one of the Tennessee guys. But I just don't know if that's going to be the best spot as we find our way through. Let's move on. Let's go to this next game, Denver, Chicago, 46-point total in Chicago. Thoughts on this one? Fields last week, I know some people were trying to make him work. That did not work. So it's not looking good.
Here, the most surprising thing that stood out to me about this is a 46-point total seems surprisingly high. Like maybe Vegas knows something we don't know. If I just would have saw these two teams, I would have assumed a 42-point total. So 46 seems a little high because I think both these offenses have been rather anemic. I know like Russell Wilson's had a couple bombs and stuff, but like I'm just telling you, as a guy that's watched the Denver games, their offense is not good. And then Chicago has just been fucking garbage. So I'm kind of surprised that this total's a little higher, and it almost makes me want to like sneaky give Justin Fields like one last go at it, right? Just one last go, because we've seen Denver's defense get roasted a couple times this year, and if he can't get it together versus them, I think I'm ready to just completely give up on him.
Yeah, I feel similar too. And our guy Jason says that since he pass rush was elite last night, he said maybe the defense is just not sure if Tennessee will pass enough though. I'd be okay with the spot. Like you said, I'm not against it fully. The other thing is the short week depends on that. But in general, not a bad spot to go. I'll go back and look what the price was. I think Cincinnati, 3,800 though. Wow, it's up there. So yeah. I don't know. You could go there if you wanted. Denver, Chicago. I actually don't have much here. The continuous, I know it's a thing in our Discord over at SHIPIT Nation every week is somebody comes through with the big conviction play on Russell Wilson and they got to finally let him cook. Like there's a reason he never cooks or that he didn't cook or anything. People have the, in the kitchen when the pots and pans on fire. That's the situation when they try and do it. Sometimes it's just not meant to be. Javonte Williams, only 5,500. I think if you wanted to go there, I know some people were lobbying for Roshan Johnson last week on the Chicago side. I guess like Judy still stayed down. Sutton, 5,300. He only went up $100. DJ Moore. Could you talk yourself into any of these guys at all as one-offs or anything like that? Or you think there's better spots?
I mean, literally just a Justin Fields skinny stack with DJ Moore would literally be the only thing I'd be interested in, maybe with a little run back of Javonte. But I got to tell you, part of my process that I've really been focusing on this year is not spreading myself out, right? Like really go pick 3 or 4 games that I like the environment in and get my correlations, get my stacks from those games and not get too cute chasing too many one-off pieces on games that feature 2 teams that I think suck. That's been part of my process. So when I do that, that leaves a lot of these games on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. And that's really what it was last week too. I know that we were showing it off on our stack rankings tool, but it was like Miami, Minnesota, LAC. It had Stroud and those guys up there. It had Jordan Love, and he had an okay game. He missed Musgrave and Stroud. I'm not saying that's going to be the one that breaks the slate, but just to show there was a good balance of it. But in the end, it was kind of like those good, tighter spots. Watson was out. Aaron Jones was out. That's why that pops up. If you just follow the news, follow the tools, you can often do it. You got the stone over there where people can break it all down. That's why it's a perfect combination between both of our sites. And you just see it that way. Sometimes it is better just to stick to that. Like, again, I love my guy Tweezy. He's always in here supporting. Great dude. I feel Fields going to be sneaky for me. Maybe he will be. And last week people tried to make it work. It wasn't like he was high owned. I'm just saying that's when people continuously say it. Russell Wilson, who we just talked about, they're 2 of the same game now. Maybe that is where the sneaky total comes from. And we get Fields and Wilson going off back and forth. I don't think so, but it's just to say maybe that's part of it. But it's funny that every week, like you said, it's like, oh, I'm just going to play a little of this guy, little of that guy. Let me get some of him too. Oh, if I just make one stack this way, it becomes a thing, right? Any more thoughts on that? And then we can move to Baltimore, Cleveland.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on Chicago and the Broncos.
All right, let's go on. This one, low total, division battle, really tough going into the dog pound in Cleveland. Tough spot to play. Baltimore coming off a tough overtime loss. There was a face mask. I'll stand by it. There was a face mask there, but still, they shouldn't have put themselves in that position to have that be an option for that to hurt them. So it comes down to that. But Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, I think, what are we waiting on here? Is there news in this one? I was trying to think. No, I don't think there is anymore, actually. So OBJ, I guess, from last week is what we were waiting to see, right? OBJ was the guy that was out last week, and people went to Zay Flowers. Thoughts on this one? Anybody here that you like within this one? I could see some secondary stacks within this game, to be honest, but what do you got?
Amari Cooper's been surprisingly consistent this year, like a lot better than I thought he would be, especially with a terrible quarterback and Deshaun Watson throwing him the ball. He is clearly the number 1 alpha there, and it's very rare that you ever get a guy who's getting 10 to 12 targets and you get him around that $6,000 flat mark, right? Because he's only $6,100, and if he's going to continue to get that kind of volume every game, well, then even in a sloggy game, I'm okay with him being an alpha wide receiver and still playing him. For Baltimore, it's just, I feel like they're just a little overpriced. You know, like Lamar at 77, Andrews at 54 actually seems like a pretty good value now that I relook at it. But Zay's getting up to 56. He's no longer like that cheap guy you can plug in. And whenever they only have an implied total of 19 points here, it doesn't make me really want to pay up to go get a lot of these Baltimore pieces.
Yeah, with it being a first look, and we'll spend time on it when we get there and just see what we've got around. But last week, there was a bunch of paydown options at tight end, and then there was Kelsey at the top, and we're not going to get the full Taylor Swift story here for you guys. Sorry, but just to say it, that was obviously the 2 areas people were looking, either paying up or paying down. If they're paying up, they were going to Kelsey, or somewhat a little bit of Andrews or Hawkinson in that middle range, but not even 10%. So to bring that up, that's what I was seeing here when I said maybe a secondary stack, couple spots like Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. Those were the interesting options on that side, because they're just going to have to slash and dash in this game. Like, they're going to try and run. Someone said it here, ugly game, fading this at all costs, slugfest. I agree with both of those comments, but we talk about this all the time. If you can get a guy like Amari Cooper, I think it's 7, 9, and 10 targets or something to start the season or close to there. That's where you can just pick those up and get those points along the way. He is 6,100. Mark Andrews, 5,400. It's another thing. This is, I think, right. Like Myron says, they're usually a slugfest, divisional games. But what we're talking about, what we said at the top, again, keep in mind what we're talking about here is secondary stack options or one-offs and things like that. So more so looking for it from that, but we're not going to be focused on this as like a game stack or something along those lines, at least not as of right now, unless there's some major injuries or something that stands out. I don't see much else here. And then Corey, I'll give you this question. How did Zach Moss only get to 7-8% ownership behind being the only back playing almost 100% of the snaps? And I'll add to it too, with Kelly at big ownership at almost the same price.
I mean, that's a really good question. In hindsight, should have played more Zach Moss, but I think coming off of a good week, a lot of people were just thinking that there might be like success lag, right? Like, don't go chase the good week from the guy before, which I think, Jerome Ford, to transition back to this game, I think he kind of falls in that same bucket. Jerome Ford could be a fool's gold this week, because if you go look at his game last week, yeah, he had a good overall points total, but when you look at how he did it, I don't think he's going to be running a lot of slants and goes and catching touchdowns for you on most weeks, right? And when you take away just that one play, it was a pretty pedestrian effort, and I think you're only going to see guys like Kareem Hunt get more involved. So if I'm punting at running back this week, it would not be with Jerome Ford. It would be more like my dude just said, go give me some Zach Moss in my life.
Yeah, I like that call. And I liked Zach Moss last week. I was typically using him in Lamar stacks, though, which I was trying to see if there was a scenario in that game where if the pace got up, and we talked a little bit about it on our first look show, I probably shouldn't have stuck with it, because the other stuff, I did move off it as my core plays, just trying to go off and see what I was looking at. But I did like the Jacksonville game, and that wasn't much better. I'll tell you what, it took 2 quarters for Trevor Lawrence to remember what a football was, and then he still almost put up 300 yards. It was really embarrassing, actually, on behalf of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and now they go to London for 2 weeks in a row, so maybe they'll like it better over there. I'm sure, by the way, if anyone's wanting to focus on that game, we didn't bring it up off the top, this will be the week that Trevor Lawrence goes nuclear, because it's not on the main slate. So in your showdown slate, you got to play him anyway. It's not you get full advantage of that, but just definitely something to stand out. It's going to be something. Cleveland played Tennessee. Ford's matchup gets better. Yeah, we know that too. I think that, again, if you want to go there, he got 10 attempts. He's been getting targets, 3 and 4 targets. Last week, the interesting note with him was he was 4,800 at the start of the week. Everyone hated him because it's the same chalk matchup that Jamal Williams had, that Joshua Kelly had. He's not going to come through. By the end of the week, there was like 6 running backs ahead of him that people were using, 7 maybe, with the high price guys mixed in. And he just fell off down the chart, and you could have actually got a decent share of points out of him. He ended up having an okay game. Lots of people would have swapped their Kelly to Ford if they could have after the fact, knowing what he did. So obviously results oriented, but just to say it. And then you mentioned it, Kareem Hunt getting involved as well. So he's going to be there. We'll talk more on that in a second when we get to Minnesota, Carolina with Akers now, but he was inactive last week. Let's talk about Washington, Philly first, though. 44.5 total. What do you think about this one?
Jalen Hurts, even when I heard he was sick last night, and even when he's sick, he still gets there. They have another big total. The best thing I can always say about Philadelphia, well, the worst thing is they're always super expensive. That's problem number one. But the best thing is they have just a super condensed offense, right? Like, they basically throw the ball to 3 guys. To me, the more interesting part of this Philadelphia game is, like, I've been selling on DeAndre Swift, but after watching him last night and the week before, like, I think he is their lead back. He got about 60% of the run out of the backfield. More than anything, he's just efficient as you could possibly be. He just gets his points, and once he eventually gets that touchdown regression, he's going to have a 25 or 30 point week and break the slate. And he's a way that not only can he break the slate, but he also, when he does that, it's directly negatively impacting AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts. So he becomes like a good pivot off of those guys within the same game.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to go about it. It's just so expensive. Like you said, 8,000. And I think there's going to be other options. Then you go look, you're like, okay, it is condensed. That's always nice. That's what we love. But then it's AJ Brown, 7,700. Devontae Smith, 7,500. Dallas Goedert, fair price, 4,400. So I'm always going to like some Goddard. I think other people will as well, though it's back-to-back weeks with 7 targets. He did like nothing last night, but he still is just there. So if you're getting those type of targets, you can do it, but it's hard. And then I think people are going to love Swift, just because now you see that he's done it a couple weeks in a row. He's putting up the yards no matter what. If you can't get to an $8,000 Hurts, you look at it as kind of like an automatic spot. You can just plug it in. I'm seeing Brian Robinson pop a little bit early here, just trying to see what he's been up to. But looks like his attempts went down last week. No targets, 10 attempts still, though. But before that, the first couple weeks,
that was a terrible script for him, though, with Buffalo just boat racing him. So I think you got to take that with a grain of salt, right?
Yeah, I actually like that call too. Now it's against Philly, and Philly's at home, and the same thing could end up being a similar scenario. So I would say that much at least. The Washington guys, I guess, if you wanted to have these one-offs, it's so tough. Like Samuel came back last week, so now it's Samuel, Dotson, McLaurin. I know Olamide Zacchaeus, or I forget how you say his last name, but if you had him filling in for Quez Watkins last night, obviously that perfect pass from Hurts to him was beautiful. But how many weeks? I think you had that, yes.
Yeah, you call it Zucchini. That's what I call him. I can never remember his name. It just every time I see it, I see Zucchini.
But I think, like, again, 2-game slate, right? That obviously makes a lot more sense. That's a way to get different. Everybody could afford the mid-tier and high-priced receivers last night, so that's a way just to get unique right out of the gate. I think our guy Nick had a nice finish. No Taylor Swift talk. All right, I'm out. He might have left us already because we said that, but I believe he came top 5 in the three max, the $150, and he had OZ, I'm going to call him, in his lineup as well. So just to name that, yeah, he says it right here. Got a 5th place last night with him. Your guy. So
good old Zucchini. You always
got the job done. But again, now I'm looking at a main slate. I don't have interest. So that's really what it comes down to for me. Let's move on. Let's go to Minnesota, Carolina. Dalton came out swinging last week. The narrative with Thielen, I think it was also too, by the way, more of the matchup. Like the slot has just been crushing it against those guys. So that's something to keep in mind for future as well. But in general, they talked about Andy Dalton and Thielen's connection, what it would be. Ended up needing Thielen. He was awesome at his price point. And then also the running back situation. Now, Madison really didn't do much last week in comparison to what you would expect. I think he got 17. It's not the worst, but you wanted a lot more. I know it worked in stacks and people made it happen, but there was other running backs too. So just to say it. But now, what's your expectation here with Akers this week? What's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so like this is what interests me about this game. Andy Dalton threw the ball, I believe, 458 times in that game, right? And if he's going to be playing again and they're going to be in a script where they're down, once again, he's just a super cheap stack that can easily get there just by getting 20 points, dragging a receiver there. And then the best part is you have the ultimate run back with Justin Jefferson. This just strikes me as a game that like you can get your access to Justin Jefferson, who is just due for a monster game, and you can have a very cheap stack that you can afford him and then not have to go punt with the rest of your lineup simply because you're playing Justin Jefferson. So if Andy Dalton's going to be there, because I don't know what the word is on what's our boy Bryce Young, right? Yeah. So I like it more if Andy Dalton's starting than if Bryce Young's starting.
I actually like that call. Let's see what the latest is. I don't know if you saw anything on Bryce Young yet this morning, but
I've been doing golf research this morning. It's Ryder Cup week,
baby. Ryder Cup week.
Let's go.
Yeah, I like that. I don't see much on it right now, but we'll wait and see on that one. But I do think your take is good there, and I also think that, like you said, as a way to get access to Jefferson to set it up that way, you can do it. Who's the Carolina guy though? Do you want to stick with Dalton up to 4,500 now? Is now it going to be a Mingo week? I think he left the game for a little bit last week as well, but still had 6 targets. So what's your thoughts if you were going to tag him up with somebody? I think Chark got in the box last week. They have a lot of guys there, though, man. But do you just stick with Thielen at the price increase or no?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think Thielen is slow. He is not good anymore, but you know what he has? Quarterbacks love him. He's like a warm Care Bear blanket, and quarterbacks throw to the guys that they feel comfortable with, right? And so even though he's slow and basically becoming dust, I still think he's definitively their number 1 wide receiver. So if that's going to be the case at 4,500, all I need is 1 touchdown, 6 catches, 60 yards, and I'm more than happy with that production.
Yeah, this production has been very good. And it's, as Jason, I was just going to mention that revenge game. He called it a revenge game, right? Minnesota. This is the spot.
I love a narrative. So just to look at it too, all the snaps and everything. But like, man, the thing about him is you could say he's dust, but all of his games that he's playing, like 4 for 5, not 7 for 9, 11 for 14, they're all very catchable balls. And that's what changes the description. Well, you can still say he's dust, and I'm not fully disagreeing with you. All he has to do is catch the ball and land on it, basically. That's what ends up happening. You just start racking up these catches, and then he has a way to get open in the end zone, and that's worked out. Touchdowns the last couple of weeks. So we'll see. We the People says Bryce Young expected back. That would definitely change things up, but we're talking about it from a first-look perspective. I think that is at least somewhat interesting. Did you touch on, maybe I missed it reading all these comments, but did you talk about, like, Akers? What the thoughts are there? Oh, yeah. I mean, whatever. I just think Akers is one of those guys. You just see some guys in the NFL that have talent, and they just never get on the field as much as they should. And I think it's just simply as easy as the coaches just don't like them, right? Rather, they don't put in the effort in practice. They don't take pass blocking serious, whatever it is. And I just think he's one of those guys that no matter what team he is, the coaches just aren't going to like him. I don't think it's a Sean McVay thing. I think it is a Cam Akers thing.
Yeah, and I will say, too, in this, again, we'll see what happens with Bryce Young, but Hayden Hurst, Thielen, and Dalton, and then get the run back with Jefferson, that, to me, reminds me, like, last week of, like, the Stroud stack where you could just get, like, Dell and another cheap guy, whether it was Collins or you went to Schultz or whatever. I'm not saying they all worked out, but just using that and then use someone on the other side, like a Ridley or an ETN or something like that. So I think this would be at least somewhat interesting, and it's at that sort of finicky number, 45.5. Like, it's right there in the middle. It could go one way or the other. Again, we'll see what ends up happening with it. We called this last week, by the way, and then I still didn't listen to myself. But remember the Jacksonville-Houston game last week where we were like, it's either going to be the game that everyone thinks is sneaky and it's not, or it actually does go off, and it ended up being the game. We all had pieces of it, and the Stroud side did work out for the most part. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at all the other action that happened on the slate. It just didn't end up being as good as it was for what the ownership became. And that could be what this game is too, but I don't hate it. Early on so far, first look, favorite spot to look at. And now we move on to the talk of the slate, which is Miami and Buffalo, 53.5 point total. There's like a 47 and a 40, a 47 and a half, a 46, 45 and a half that we just talked about. After that, nothing else. So what are we doing here and how are you going to attack this one?
I mean, the biggest problem with this game is there's just a lot of very price prohibitive guys, right? Like both of the quarterbacks are very expensive. Their top stackable option, Diggs and Hill, are both very, very expensive. I don't know what the word is on Waddle, but if he's going to play, we know he's not cheap. Gabe Davis is up to 5,900. It's like if you want to stack the quarterbacks in this game, you're going to be punting with the rest of your lineups. Because if you go Allen and Diggs and want to run it back with Tyreek Hill, you got no money left for the rest of your lineup. So you're going to have to be clever on how to stack this game. You better find some punt options that could get there in this game, whether that's your Dawson Knox or maybe Smythe doesn't screw us this week, or Barrios, somebody like that, right? And that's the biggest issue I'm running into this game is how do I get into this game and have any money left to build the rest of my lineup? Because you don't win a GPP by having the right stack. You win a GPP by having a full lineup of 9 guys that work.
Yeah, and we saw it, I believe it was with the Million Maker winner last week in the $20. It was like he just had, I think it was, wasn't it like Stafford and Laporta?
It was Goff. That's who you meant, right?
Sorry,
Goff
I meant to say, not Stafford. Yeah. Obviously, watching him last night, Goff and Laporta, but then he got his Mostert, his Tyreek, and he had other stuff going in there. So it's like sometimes you can do it like that. If you could get your Dalton Thielen on and then jam all these rest of these guys in, maybe that would be a thing. But I'm just saying in general, it's like you said, the prices are up. 9,200 on Tyreek, 8,100 on Diggs. You go to tight end, lot cheaper, 32, 31, and 3,000. Smythe, of course, is going to bounce back when nobody plays him as much this week as what they did last week. He'll be, owned still because he's in this game, but I just think that in general. Now, Allen 8,200, Tua 7,400. Do you think more people just land on the Tua side for the savings and go with Tyreek and then run it back with one Buffalo guy? Or how do you think they attack it this week? And then how do you think the running backs get handled as well?
I think that the better side to stack is definitely Josh Allen, because Tua, as good as he is this season, he really doesn't score as many fantasy points as people think that he does, because he offers almost no rushing upside, right? And like Josh Allen, if I'm going to spend $7,400 on Tua, I'd find the $800 and get to Josh Allen, who not only can throw for 4 touchdowns just like Tua, but can also run for 50 yards and a touchdown. And you just don't get that from Tua. Now, if they were $1,600 apart, I would be more open to it. But to me, $8,200 and $7,400 are in the same range of salaries, and I would rather get to Josh Allen. But as you already said, I think the running backs are where to go here. Both these teams are running the ball super effectively this year. James Cook, yes, he never falls in the end zone. From the 20 to the 20, I'm telling you, he is a top 3 running back in the NFL. But then Buffalo says, oh, we're inside the 10. We got to get all-time legend Latavius Murray in there now, which just tilts my balls. And then we saw what Miami did. Raheem Mostert was awesome. Devin Achan was awesome. I think that's where I'd rather go. Stay away from the stacks in this game. Go give me the running backs in this game, maybe a punt tight end, and then I'll go stack elsewhere, just like I did this last week with the Chargers and Vikings. Go get pieces of this game, but have my stacks elsewhere.
Yeah, and just trying to think back to last week too, like this comes up right away. Shout out to OnlyFan, always supporting. Appreciate you. Just says, the secondary stack with Tyreek and Diggs. Can it work? Yes, because both of them can just rack it up, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're 7,400 plus 8,200 quarterback got there. I see that, but I also think there's a little bit of a product of Keenan Allen, Justin Jefferson, both getting there. And now, like you said, maybe it ends up being the running backs. James Cook, again, hard to advocate, but not really, not on these stats. I'm just saying it's tough when people see him not get in the box, but you can also see some positive regression in that manner, because 15, 17, 12 carries, 98 and 123 yards the last 2 weeks. He's got 6, 4, and 3 targets, all with no touchdowns, $6,300 in this game, in this spot. So I actually think he'll pick up some steam. I get it as the week goes on, but if Mostert and people, Mostert and Achan, where people can't decide between them, or people are scared of Murray and Harris taking it away from James Cook, I actually do have interest there. And just to say it, but like, again, when Gabe Davis has big games, oftentimes it is Diggs that comes along with him. You can actually play them both. But the problem is, as somebody else said, our guy BMAC, pricing seems a little bit tighter. It definitely does. Listen to this. Allen, Diggs, Davis, run it back with Tyreek, only $3,700 left. You say, okay, it's easy. Let me fix that. We'll go back to the well. Smythe, run the same stack. It's almost 5,000. You put a cheap D in. What do you got? Still only around 5,000. And you need 2 running backs, a wide receiver, and a flex. I know we'll get value to make it work, but I'm saying you're getting thin fast. And usually that's a problem. So we do have to look for other ways to get different within this spot. I think you nailed it. Could be with the running backs here. And then you get to open things up for some other games that we'll talk about after.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else on this one you want to mention? I know it's a big one. If you guys have questions, throw them out there. We're going to save it. We're going to use a lot of time at the end. We're only 30 minutes in. Got to go back and scroll through. I like my guy DJen's way of going back through and just doing the questions after. I try and answer some and get people involved as we go throughout. Like this one, can he stay hot? I don't know, but do I want to pay that price for him that he got increased to? Probably not. So we'll see how that game shakes out. Let's move on. Let's go to Pittsburgh, Houston, low total 42. But we've talked about this with Houston games specifically in the past, where sometimes they just end up going off. Like we talked about Jacksonville, Houston, the Indy week, the week before, whatever, but also that it doesn't really matter. Like I think people always forget this and we'll repeat it again because there's new viewers, but the score could be 21-17. Somebody on these teams still has to put up those points and they can still be good fantasy options for secondary stacks or one-offs and not need to be like this dream game stack that you're looking for in your head. We're talking about it from a perspective of can you play guys in this spot or use them in secondary stacks? We're not saying you got to go stack the whole game up unless maybe you are. Give me your thoughts.
So, like, the best thing about this game is just everybody, and I mean everybody in this game is affordable. I don't think there's a single person in this game over $5,600, which is just crazy, right? And yeah. I'm still going to buy on Kenny Pickett, but sadly it seems like to me that the Steelers are much more interesting in being like that good defensive team like they were back in the day and just being conservative on offense. So I don't know that Kenny Pickett has that big-time ability to ever break a slate, but with all these guys being so cheap, you're telling me George Pickens can't have 8 for 120 and a touchdown? Like, these are, like, real things that can happen. There are pieces in this game that I would love to play as a one-off piece because even with the low 41-point total, I think that you're going to be in a competitive game. Nico Collins, George Pickens, Dameon Pierce, guys like that, I'm totally interested in because somebody in this game is going to score these points. I just don't think it's a game that I would want to make as my primary stack. And as much as I ran out CJ Stroud last week, that was because I thought he was in a great scoring environment. I don't think this will necessarily be a great scoring environment, but some pieces will score.
Yeah, Myron Sharp, too. I like this guy. He says Bills D. That's another thing. Last week, I saw some Sharp players do that where they said Kelly's chalk. Okay, if it's going to be Kelly, you think right away it's going to be someone from Minnesota coming back. But I saw people use Kelly with the Chargers D and say, how does this game turn from a 54-point total or whatever and turn down? It's not only does Kelly score, but the defense puts him in the spot as well. And that really hurts all those other Minnesota sides. So again, if you're doing different stacks that you're comfortable with, I don't hate that. I think we just talked about James Cook. You want to do like a James Cook and a Bills D or something like that. I actually wouldn't hate it. You can do all kinds of little different things like that, though, where I think you can get away with it. Again, way off the board craziness, but you could have like Josh Allen naked with the Bills D and still have Tyreek and pick up the pieces of the game that way and hope that Josh Allen does his work. Hope that Tua gets banged up or hurt because of not banged up or injured, but if the D takes over and hurts him that way and scores points, and Tyreek can still get his because the way he gets there just is. So I've definitely seen things like this work in the past with back in the day with Winston stacks. People used to play Winston for the Saints D, and then the top wide receiver from the other side, just let Winston go nuts and then run it back against it. But again, you can do it a bunch of different ways. I like your call out though in this game. Again, being a first look, I was like, we're probably not going to stack this game up. And then you go look at the pricing. Like you said, like the $5,600 Stroud, I think is the most expensive guy in the game.
It is.
Yeah, you called it.
Just real quick on that thing on Miami Buffalo, I'm not as convinced that is a slam dunk shootout game like the Vikings and Chargers was last week, right? Miami has been really good this year, but I'm just going to let you know Miami is not the same explosive offense on the road as they've been at home over the past season plus. So just be aware of that. There is a chance Buffalo absolutely boat races the Dolphins and they don't do shit. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I do like that call. And then also the other thing about it is we will get, no matter how you want to shake it out from casual players, things like that, but we will get some overreaction to last week where it was like you said off the top of the show. It doesn't mean we're applying it specifically to this week, but you said it where it's like people see what happened the week before and they just roll it. It's no different than Monday Night Football showdown, I think is usually the biggest edge. Why? Whatever happened in Sunday Night Football, if it was 5-1s that won, all of a sudden Monday night is all these 5-1s, more than there should be. If it was the quarterback captain, the next night it's, let me get those quarterback captains. They hit. Well, no, they hit last night. This is a totally different slate. It has nothing to do with that at all. This is a similar situation where everyone says, I'm an idiot last week. I tried all these other stacks out. And of course it was just playing the most popular game. Doesn't mean it's wrong. I'm just saying it can be some overreaction. So you do get a little bit more ownership that can lean with that. So I don't hate that call. This game does have some appetizing pieces at these prices. Did you have any thoughts on, just before we move on, the Pittsburgh running backs. Najee with the steel toe boots on every time he's rolling out there, more like concrete bricks on his feet. And then you got Jaylen Warren, who actually only playing like half the snaps typically, but still getting almost 10 attempts. He's getting targets. This is typically a D you want to roll up against. Etienne Jr. didn't do it justice last week, but they have got beat on the ground quite a bit.
I mean, here's what I'll say. You can see that, like, Tomlin still loves Najee and doesn't want to let him go, right? But Warren is clearly the more effective running back. But on main slates like this, I don't like to try to get cute and try to pick between two running backs like this, right? It's just not the place I want to do. And there's so many running backs that clearly have lead roles that I don't want to try to spend my time as a pay down option trying to guess which Steeler might do well whenever I could just go play another running back who I know is going to get 70 or 80% of the usage out of their backfield. So I'm not going to probably play either of them.
And I think that's overlooked actually quite a bit. Like people, again, if you see, Najee and Warren coming in at 2% and 3%, I'm not going to be mad at you if you go and say, I'm going to just take the shot on this spot. Or if you see Pittsburgh pass catchers like Freiermuth or Pickens or those guys pick up a lot of steam, then I think that's okay as well. Then it's like, okay, at least understand why you're doing it. The matchup we would have liked on paper, if this, then that, but you just said it. Everyone's trying to pick their spot in these scenarios. The only time you get it right is last week with Miami when it's Mostert and Achane going for massive points on both sides. You couldn't get that one wrong, but typically that's not the case. We've been doing this a while. You don't see that very often. Anything else you want to chime in on there? If not, let's move to the Rams at Indy for another one of those in-betweeners like the Minnesota-Carolina game, 45.5 point total on this one.
I assume there's no chance Richardson's back. I mean, isn't it usually 10 days on concussion protocol? So isn't there like a fighting chance he'll be back this week? Because if he is, I actually really like this game. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm a buyer in Anthony Richardson, which is hilarious because in best ball I was shitting all over him. But if he's back, I think that he could score and really push the pace of this game. And I think Matthew Stafford, even as bad as they played last night and as good as the Bengals defense looked, I don't think that Indianapolis has the Bengals defense. And I'm very warm to a Richardson with a really skinny stack, just one of his pass catchers, or hell, maybe even Zach Moss is a really weird stack with him, and then run it back with Puka or Atwell or somebody like that. And I think that could be one that I would be warm to. But this is all assuming Richardson's playing, which I honestly have no idea.
I love Ross. Looks like he waits for the hold to close. Yeah, you go back in the day, was who was it there? Le'Veon Bell, the most patient runner of all time, but he would wait for the opening and go. Najee's the opposite. He waits for the hole to close, then he runs for it. I definitely like that call. That's kind of what I see as well, quite often. So, your points here are good. I look back, just trying to look it up while you were talking about Anthony Richardson. He's still in the concussion protocol. They'll see as the week goes on. But at the end of the day, it just said, obviously, if he's in, he's good to go. And then, how does that affect a guy like Zach Moss is the question, because you mentioned him earlier. Kyron Williams, who could have done a lot more last night by the looks of it, to be honest, but just didn't quite get there. But he's getting all the targets, man. 7, 10 back-to-back weeks. There's definitely a spot for him here. Nakua, Atwell had a good game, could have had a much better game. Nakua didn't have the best game, made a key catch down the stretch, but it didn't end up paying off to be the winning spot because they still lost by 3. But Zach Moss, Kyron Williams, any of those guys for you?
Yeah, I mean, the more we talk about this game, if Richardson's playing, I can already tell you this is going to be a game I'm going to be hitting hard. I just like it. I think this is a game that is going to be very low owned, and you have guys who are just, I mean, the Rams have super concentrated usage. It's basically Williams, Atwell, and Puka right now getting all of the usage. And then with the Colts, you're going to have Richardson, Moss, and maybe Pittman. So it's like, if I want to stack this game, it becomes very clear who I need to stack and how well they would be correlated. And if I do get that 31-28 type game, I'm going to be in concentrated offenses at low ownership and be overexposed to these guys that are in a shootout.
Yeah, if we get a 31-28 game here, you may see another extremely high 300-point scoring week, although not as many people might be on it because if they're not all in on this game, because all these guys do is rack up PPR points. You said it, like where they come from, but like when you look at it, Williams, Nakua, Atwell, then you've got Granson and Higbee on the other side. Downs actually I think Downs had a pretty good week last week. If I go back and look here, he had 12 targets, 8 receptions for 57 yards. So he's at 3,500. Pittman, I think he was still fine last week. So it's 11, 12, and 11 for targets to start the season with 8, 9, and 8 for that. He's had a touchdown. He's getting targeted. Like this is a spot where you can just rack up DraftKings points. I don't think now just seeing it on paper and just talking about it out loud, I don't think it's going to get overlooked. But I do think it's a way that you can get different if you want to go. If you go a bunch of pieces in this game, you just can't go the other way, right? Like you have to look at it from a different perspective. So let me just do this quickly while we're on here. Let's go Williams, Nakua, Pittman, Atwell. Would you like Higbee or Granson?
Probably Higbee. Higbee. Although wait, yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I want 3 Rams though.
Yeah, you might not. That's the only challenge. Like I said, you may just not even use him there. Let's just leave him out of it for a second, and let's even leave Stafford out of it because who cares? Like,
now you can go over there to the Buffalo game and go grab Smythe and Diggs, right? Like you can go get some pieces from that game, punt at tight end over in that game, and take the nice expensive piece over there, and hope Diggs kind of starts to find his regression.
I think that's exactly what you can do, and then you can also just get other pieces within it. Like if you did that, you can not quite afford. Yeah, still a little bit tight, but just the point to be, again, going back to it because we got a few more games to get through, and then we'll get to the questions. Is just like you said, you can get the PPR points stacked up here. You can just get after it that way. Pittman's definitely a guy still just at 6,500. Maybe you leave Nakua out. You can play Atwell for cheaper anyway, $1,200 less. Williams there at 6,000. Lots of options that you can go to here. Let's move on though. Let's go to this Tampa Bay New Orleans game. We got about 4 games left here. Let's get through these.
All right. So, like, I mean, what the lowest total of any game on the slate? That tends to be a pretty big red flag for me. I see Derek Carr is questionable. Once again, Baker Mayfield, my favorite player in the NFL, and I will continue to die on this hill just like I did last night. He is not a good fantasy quarterback. I just don't play him at fantasy. He just never really offers that elite upside that I want from my quarterback. I get that he's cheap at 5,400, but I can find other quarterbacks at 5,400 that I'd rather play than him. The only piece that really interests me would probably be a naked Chris Olave or a naked Rachaad White. Maybe a weird correlation between them, but I just, this isn't a game. I'm telling you guys, I'm really trying to stay away from certain games and just go get into the better scoring environments. And this does not strike me as a game that's going to have a great scoring environment. Yeah,
and prices up on some of these guys, like not maybe from where they have been or could get to, but the idea of Olave, Evans, Godwin, all that. Everyone's talking about Jameis Winston revenge game.
Yeah, I mean, Jameis. They're forgetting the whole middle ground. Well, Jameis Winston sucks.
Yeah, I kind of like getting after the defense here. Thoughts on that one? The defenses are up there, both of them in pricing, but you can get in on that. And what would it be? 3,300 to get in.
I mean, don't forget, Jameis Winston's pass completion percentage would be about 75% if you counted all of his passes in his career to the other team.
That's correct. Also, the chat makes a good point too. Kamara, I think, is back now, right? They reinstated him yesterday, so
yep.
I don't know how that's going to look, but what's his price at?
I mean, let's see. Is he even on here?
I don't know. So I didn't see it.
Yeah. The thing I'm looking at, I don't see him. So wait, surely he's over on the DraftKings, right? I guess I could go.
Yeah, check it out on DraftKings while you pull that up. I'm just having a look here. But yeah, Rachaad White, 5,600. Again, see how that goes. But it just feels like, again, what has he got? 8, 6, and then the one game against the Bears, he had 21, but he's still getting the attempts. 17, 17, 14 targets, 2, 3, 5. Like he's still getting involvement that way. And then even in the red zone, he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 rushes in the last 3 weeks. So he's still getting opportunities. Someone said Kamara, Godwin, secondary stack. And the Knicks at 6,100.
Yeah, 6,100. No thanks. No thanks, pal. I'm out.
Yeah. Worst running back in the league. Yeah, so 5,600 if you go to Rachaad White there. Like you, I'm not going to have too much interest in this. We'll see as the week goes on. But let's move on to this next one. Could have interest here. 47.5 point total. Raiders and the Chargers. Thoughts on this game?
Probably my favorite game on the slate. Like this is the first game when I was looking at them, I was like, this is a game I want to stack. In LA, in the Dome, right? That's going to be good. Vegas is notorious for not playing any defense and getting into these shootouts. Really, the only question to me is, can the Raiders push this pace? And if they can, I think you're looking at another 28-27 type game that could break the slate, and I definitely want to have access to it. My only question is, can the Raiders hold up their end of the bargain here?
Yeah, that's going to be how it comes down to. Jimmy G just goes off and on, right? So you got to see, but there is options here, and you look at it like last week was a much better week for him, even with not completing much at all, but just in general, like Jacobs, 7,100. Kelly, can you go back to the well? It's 5,300. Devontae Adams, 8,000, right around that same price tag as a guy like Diggs, for example. So we had it last week pegged a little bit, I think. I don't know what Jefferson, let me look it up here, because last week it was
Jefferson had like 31 points, I think. And now with Mike Williams being out, that opens up some value at the wide receiver spot too for the Chargers. Either Palmer or Johnston's probably going to emerge as like the clear second receiver. And apparently Keenan Allen is still really good. I am shocked how good he has been this year.
Yeah. Well, who do you like better between Palmer and Johnston? You're in the best ball streets more heavy. Palmer, obviously, only $300 more, had a much better game last week. But then everybody that was, all offseason talking about it was talking about Johnston and picking him up late and getting him in, whatever round and talking through that. Do you like either of these guys more than the other?
Yeah, so like in a cash game type setting, I would definitely prefer Josh Palmer. He is going to be on the field more. He is going to run more routes. But if I'm trying to do like a really gross Justin Herbert stack that people aren't going to want to do, I'm going to stack Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston with him because Johnston has that ability to get 2 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, right? Like that's going to be his role. So he has the bigger upside in my opinion. Yeah,
well, who are the back? Brian Hoyer, Aiden O'Connell. What we see. I forgot Jimmy G in the concussion protocol too. I forgot about that late in the game. So see how that shakes out, but that could be tougher for the Raiders to hold up their end of the bargain, as you brought up and mentioned earlier. So again, I still think people are going to be going to plays here and getting these guys in it, but Allen without Eckler has just been nonstop. I'm not expecting 20 targets again, but we would have taken 9 or 10 again, like he got in the first 2 weeks. You're going to get, anywhere over 10. That price is just bad at 7,900. It's fine. You can just get in on him in the sense that it's too low for somebody that's going to get that action. And I definitely think there's opportunity here. He's right under Adams. He's right under Diggs, who's at 8,100 in that big game. So one of these two, or maybe both, Adams and Allen, I think are going to be guys that can come through. Myers down to just 5,500 now. That seems way too cheap as well. So we'll have to see how this game shakes up. But I do think people are going to get here, right? Like there's definitely opportunity to play some of these guys in this game, no problem. And even the quarterbacks, Herbert is more tthan Tua, but we'll see what the backup situation looks like. Jimmy out with the concussion. We'll have to see how it all goes as the week goes on. The chat's talking about don't sleep on Everett. You could go to Everett here. He had, what did he have last week? Six more targets. Yep. Again.
And he's down to 3,600. He's a guy that's always in the 4,000. So now that he's down to the 3,600, that's where I like to start to target Everett. And don't forget, Justin Herbert scored like over 30 DK points last week, and that was with Keenan Allen vulturing one of his long touchdowns, right? So like that's pretty incredible. You could have that while you're being vultured 6 or 7 points on that touchdown they scored.
Yeah, and even besides that, that was the big week, but 25.2 the week before that, 21 the week before that. Herbert's been doing just fine, and he's interesting too because 7,400 for Tua, 8,200 for Josh Allen. Bang, right in the middle, 7,800 with Justin Herbert. So Herbert on some winning lineups last week as well. So
and has better punt options at his wide receiver spot between Palmer and Johnston.
Yeah, and it's affordable where when you go, like we said, if you're going, I guess you could look at it both ways, but like Josh Allen with Diggs, if you want it to be with Davis, or if you're forcing a run back, it gets a little bit more challenging. But I guess it's another way to look at where, like the ownership, if you go Allen, Diggs, and one of the tight ends between Kincaid or Knox and run it back with Tyreek, it's got to be getting up there in price. If you go pretty similar, if you go Herbert with Allen with one of his cheap guys and run it back with Devontae Adams, and then you can still find a cheap tight end and some running backs anywhere. So I definitely think either of those two options are possible, but I would expect the Chargers the Chargers Raiders game to be lower owned than the Miami Buffalo version of what we just talked about.
100%.
I like that call actually early on as well. So mark that one down. Let's go. Second last game here. We've got New England, Dallas, 43.5 point total. What's your thoughts on this game?
Man, I could not believe the egg that Dallas laid. I was so confident in Tony Pollard in that spot against the Cardinals Sunday afternoon, and they sucked. I mean, they were horrific. Offensively, defensively, the Cowboys really dropped a peg in my book, but I also don't want to overreact. They are back at home this week, and part of me wants to go back to them. I just can't believe they're really that bad. I don't think that this game has great shootout vibes because the Patriots can't get in a shootout with anybody, but I do think this is a piece where I either want to go grab Pollard or Lamb and have that big stud just sitting in my flex until the afternoon. So if I get off to a hot start, I have that big piece waiting for me that could go get me that 35 burger in the afternoon.
Yeah, so 7,800 and 7,500. Pollard, 78, Lamb, 75. Throw that in your flex, and then you can make the decision down the stretch. The always hard decision of Pollard. Do I leave him? Or do I move to CeeDee Lamb? But Ramondre Stevenson, 6,200 in this game. I see Hunter Henry, 43. But like these prices are all, middling or up there. And then you look at CeeDee Lamb. Like I said, that's, now another notch just below because he's 7,500 of all those guys we already talked about. Chase at 78, Devontae, Allen, all those guys that are there at 79, 8, 81 for Diggs. You keep going up to guys like Jefferson and Tyreek. So Lamb is right there at the bottom of that tier at 7,500 in this game.
Lamb has way more home run games at home than he does on the road.
Yeah, and I don't know if anymore, like the old thing was always the same with Belichick, like he's going to shut down their number one guy and whoever. I mean, if you people debate it maybe, but I still think it would be Lamb, even though Pollard's been much better and is great. But even if he is, I just don't know if it's the same spot and the same thing that you could find here where I'd be fine with Lamb anyway at 7,500. So I don't hate that, but it's not my favorite game or my favorite spot. I don't mind the Pollard call that you had either. Defense, maybe. Dallas is just not the same, and they're still at 4,000. Last week, no Diggs for them seemingly was a problem, and Dobbs found his way around against them. And then that's going to segue us right into this last game. We got Brock Purdy at home with the 49ers, 44 total, but huge spread. Two touchdown favorites for the San Francisco 49ers. And people just saw Arizona beat up Dallas. That has to be like their Super Bowl. Like we talk about like letdown spots and things like that. Like this, I guarantee you there's people like 14 is just too much in the NFL. We just got to take Arizona and hope that they stay close and do it again. But to me, it just screams massive smash for the 49ers here. I can see it already. So your thoughts on this game here and some of the guys you like within it?
Yeah, 49ers are legit. Like, they're definitively one of the two best teams in the NFL. Their defensive side of the ball, they're going to suffocate Arizona. Arizona's kind of filling themselves after the good week against Dallas, but, like, I'm just telling you, this is letdown city. Of course, I would want to play Christian McCaffrey here, but I just, when I start thinking about what a $9,200 running back's going to do to my roster construction this week, yes, I love Christian McCaffrey, but do I love him enough to what he is going to do to the rest of my build? And the answer to that is probably no. I think that there's just some higher-end receivers that I'm going to want to get to this week, some higher-end quarterbacks I'm going to want to get to, and I think I'm going to probably land more in that $5,000 to $6,000 range for most of my running backs. So as much as I may like McCaffrey this week and think that he is a good play, I have to think of what he does to my entire roster and not just you don't look at the individual play, you look at the totality of the lineup. And because of that, I sadly think that I'm going to be off McCaffrey.
Yeah, 9,200. Obviously what he's been doing, 29, 26, 23, like he's getting all the attempts, he's getting options, but at the same time, there's two arguments for it. Let me put it this way, actually. So at the same time is that the wide receivers that we all talked about, a lot of them are that or cheaper. Like that's Tyreek or who'd we talk about? Tyreek or Jefferson in those spots. But I understand why someone would say that's the flip side of the coin is that they're saying, you know, if they, like Nick says right here, if this game's over early, that hurts his ceiling, right? And I just said that. And then on top of it, I can see the argument though where people say, oh, but I'll just play a high-priced running back instead of a receiver. But there's just going to be so many options, and there is running backs in the 5 to 6K range now that can put up 20 points just as easily as McCaffrey does, even though he feels safe and he's all good. Someone mentioned Elijah Mitchell, 4,600.
He's been looking good, and the better he looks, the more confident they're going to be giving him a few more carries. And every time he gets a carry, that's one less that McCaffrey's getting.
Yeah, I guess you can play it from that angle. I mean, 4,600 is definitely workable.
Oh, I ain't playing him. I just think it's just a reason to fade McCaffrey. No way I'm playing Elijah Mitchell in my player pool.
Great point. I'm actually glad you brought that up. I talk about this all the time with projections, right? Well, you can't really play any DFS sport right now without projections. They're important. You've got them for your sports. We've got them at SHIPIT Nation for our sports. But I think that gets, lost in the mix, the point you just made. And it wasn't even just about projections. I'm just going to relate it to that quickly, though. Oh, this guy projects the best. We got to get him in there. It's like, no, sometimes you're using the projections to see what other people are going to do. And it's no different with projected ownership. And I'm not saying McCaffrey's going to get super popular. This narrative could fit in where people say, oh, if the blowout happens, he's not going to get played, all that. And he gets you as 25 and you just have to see how that fits your lineup. But the point you made is that where you're not looking at Elijah Mitchell to play him as much, at least as of now. I'm not going to put you on the spot for that. But you're saying, I'm looking at that as that's just another reason to not be in on McCaffrey. And that's, again, how you're looking at it as like a decision to help make another decision. That's part of the process that you and I talk so much about that I don't think people really apply as much. They look at it like, oh, if you're not going to play McCaffrey, I might as well go to Elijah Mitchell. The level or the layer to it is, no, I'm actually saying that because he could jump in, if this, then that makes me like him even less. And that's why you're not on either. So somebody talked about San Fran D, 4,700.
Ridiculous.
Although it might do better than Dallas, to be honest. Like it's not hard, results-wise. I'm just saying it might make more sense in front of it. Obviously, we know how Dallas did not work out. I'm talking about on paper. If you gave me both those matchups last week, I think I'd still feel better about the San Francisco spot with Dallas down Diggs and other things. But I played Dallas like a donkey, and it did not work out. So a hard time going back to it, but that means less people will as well. Any thoughts on that before we get to the questions?
You just said something that I want when you were talking about like the causation, like this thing happens, so this happens. It's not just about this wide receiver's out, I'm going to play his backup. That's how most people think whenever they see value open up. But like to me, if Jimmy Garoppolo is out, right, that makes me a lot less interested in a Justin Herbert stack, right? Because for a Justin Herbert stack to get there, it's going to be expensive. He is going to need to be in a game where the pace is going to be pushed, and he has to score a lot like he did with the Vikings this last week. And I'm not sure Brian Hoyer can do that and push the pace. So if we get word that Jimmy Garoppolo is indeed out this week, to me, that has a big impact on my interest in a Justin Herbert stack. So don't always just think about when somebody is out or when news breaks, how that just directly impacts the guy above and below him, but think about how it impacts the game and the slate itself.
Yeah, love that call. That's definitely a key factor in coming up with this stuff. So I think that's a good one. Nick made another good point earlier. As you guys start throwing any more questions that you want answered in there now, but we're going to go back through them. Early AM Ryder Cup and the London Jags. I do like that. It just makes me feel, I like the optimism. I really do, Nick. That's, I was thinking like, but that actually makes it a lot better. Burrow playing against the Rams because of the Super Bowl defeat, revenge. What else do we got here? Myron like Denver, Chicago, Indy, Rams. We talked about those last two. I don't know if you can talk more on the Denver, Chicago one, but ranking them, I would have them last of those three for sure.
Definitely. I'm still trying to convince myself one last time to roll with Fields. One last time, but I don't think I can get there. I think I talked myself into some other stacks more.
Yeah, it's really tough. And then when you got me excited about some of these other ones, I look at them like, oh man, I'm never high on that anyway. And again, the talk about Fields, he can break a slate. He had 2 games last year where he put up over 40, and I believe they were back-to-back, and the other weeks were all 20, 23, 24, but everything's got to be factored in. And that to me is like, again, how often is it going to happen? It's not how often you're right. It's how much you make when you are right. But man, he's also almost 7,000 again. Yep. And I get it, but man, it's tough. I don't know. He could have a big game here. You could use him naked. You could use him with just Komet or something like that. I guess that's fine. Use him. I guess let's talk about this one quick while I pull up some other ones, but the Goff Laporta thing this week could just be that. Maybe I'll talk you into it that way. Maybe it's just Fields with Komet or Fields with Moore, and then just fill out the rest. Don't do nothing else. Don't try and find other stuff, anything like that. Just run.
I've really warmed up to skinny stacks. Like, just go look at Andy Dalton. If you just ran Andy Dalton and Adam Thielen, that won a GPP this week, right? I think you won like $50,000. It was in my short today. And like, that was it. You just needed that skinny stack, right? So maybe we got to get away from always thinking when we play an NFL quarterback, we have to double stack them. Maybe the answer is just a skinny stack. And then that opens up the rest of your roster, especially if it's a cheap stack, to go get some nice expensive pieces in good spots. And that is how you're different, is you play the skinny stack that's cheap that no one else is playing, and it can get there because both of those guys are so affordable.
Yeah, and you said it. I think also Stroud Dell would have probably worked okay.
That would have been nutted.
Fair enough. Like you could still get something out of that. So I think that Mike brought up a point. Buffalo, a tough place for the Finns to play. Did score 29 last year in a loss to them, but yeah, it's definitely a tough spot, and it's also division. So it's always tougher than you might think. And that's why, not talking you off of it, but just saying if you think it's going to get overowned and you are looking for ways to get different, I just don't think you're leaving out pieces of that game. I think it's still a good idea to hover around it. Even if you're going against it, hover around it, find some of those pieces that you could plug in. Our guy Go Collect was the one who brought it up. Kamara, Godwin stack. I don't see that. I guess, yeah, but not for me. Who else? Anybody else in here? Palmer getting that Mike money. Yeah, everyone seems to like Palmer more based on the 7 targets last week. Quentin Johnson's not the guy. It's going to be Palmer. You talked on that a little bit. We're talking about Hoyer if he plays, or if it ends up being Aiden O'Connell there. Pat's backfield might be getting timeshare and the Zeke revenge narrative. Do you think they're going to get Zeke in there for some action in that game?
No, he sucks. It's pretty simple. Ramondre's awesome. Like, he's like definitively a better back. And if I know anything about old Belichick, he wants to win. So he's going to play his better player more.
Yeah, I don't see much else, man. I think that's good. Do you want to talk about degen75.com for a little bit? And then again, like I said, if you guys want to use promo code SHIPIT, you get 10% off. But we've talked about this plenty. Sometimes first-time watchers, new video this week for them. Give us your thoughts. Give us everything you got on the site. Reasons to sign up.
Yeah, so first of all, just know that like this is a very exciting week to come check it out because I'm doing PGA, which is Ryder Cup this week, which my boy Tambo, I'm pretty sure it shipped the President's Cup last year just by playing some game theory, and we're going to be applying all that same stuff this year to the Ryder Cup because it's just such an edge, and we don't normally get this great correlation. We got college football, which is like, I'm just telling you, if you ever want to learn how to like play a sport and get good at cash game, college football where it's at because people are idiots. And then of course we're doing all the NFL stuff with showdowns, projections, ownership. We're over on the solver, and we're just focused on the process, not focused on picks. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll let you try a free week, and then if you like it, I'm telling you, go use the code SHIPIT to get 10% off, and you can sign up for the monthly package, the yearly package, whatever you want. We're not going to be letting you down, and I think that I've met with my team, and we might even be introducing a new sport come February. So more on that to come. So check it out.
Yeah, I love it. I use it. I love that if you guys are with us at SHIPIT Nation, even members that are watching this, and you've already got the solver who we're partnered with, even if you've got it from Degenerate75 first, it doesn't matter. You can correlate all that and get it auto-synced as well. So I can check between the two of them and see if there's any differences, do all that. But it's definitely a good spot to check out. And for the all access with the 10% off, it gets you less than $50. So between the two sites, you can get in for pretty cheap, have everything covered, add that on. The Stone, if you guys haven't heard about or used it, the Rosetta Stone tool that DGen has over there is awesome for all those sports. So you can check that out. But here it is, shipitnation.com/DGen75 or just DGen75.com. Use the promo code SHIPIT. That'll get you the 10% off. So you guys can go and see that there. And then last one for me, bring it up to you guys. If you do want to check out shipitnation.com, you can use promo code DGen75 in reverse here. Us using SHIPIT over there, DGen75 on ours, gets you 10% off the monthly or the 6-month bundle. If you want to try us out, that gets you in the Discord. If you want to try out the site, use the code. You get $19 for the trial. I think that's going to do it for this one, though, my brother. We got this coming up again next week on your channel. We're going to go back to it. I know you're trying out some StreamYard. The quality today, it was actually kind of thinking it was me at the beginning. It ended up coming back around, I think, so we're good enough on that. Any final thoughts for you on week 4 before I take us home?
It's going to be fun. Can't wait. Be checking out Saturday night, 7 o'clock. I'll be doing all my final thoughts and ownership and everything. So come check that out, 7 o'clock in the Lord's time zone. I'll be live on YouTube.
Yeah, always going to tune into that. Excited for all the other shows this week. You guys know where to find me. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at ToeTagginTambo. You can find me there over at ShipItNation.com in the Discord. I'll be back. I think my next show coming up is with Mayo. Actually, the Thursday Night Football show first, and then with Mayo on Friday, as always, on the Mayo Media Network. But that's going to do it for this one, guys, for the Week 4 first look. For Degenerate75, for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it!